everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Christy Chitengu, and as you will read in the description below, today's video is about my experience as a foreign law clerk at the Constitutional Court of South Africa. I've always wanted to clerk at the Constitutional Court. It was always on my mind, and so I was very devastated when I thought that my citizenship or the lack thereof would disable me from being able to clerk at the court. Not soon after, before I finished my LLB degree, I found out that people can clerk at the Constitutional Court as foreigners, if not as local clerks. It's the same application process. You do the same exact job. The only difference with the foreign clerkship is that you do not get paid, and you do not have to do it for the duration of the full year. So local clerks will clerk for 1 year, and they may extend depending on the circumstances surrounding their clerkship, but foreign clerks can clerk for a period of 3 months to 6 months to a year, and so it's a very flexible program. I applied in 2021, and I got accepted and was confirmed in December 2021 that I would be clerking from January to July for a period of 6 months. So the application process, like I mentioned, is exactly the same as the local clerkship. You have to submit all the things that local clerks are required to. That is a CV, a cover letter, a written piece and a sample of your writing, your qualifications, as well as 2 to 3 reference letters. I will put a link to the Constitutional Court's website below, which will direct you to the application requirements. What also threw me off is that on the website, they don't openly advertise for foreign clerks, but it is a thing. When you submit your application as a local clerk would, you just have to make sure in your subject line that you're applying to be a foreign clerk, and also on the Z83 form, which is a government form, because you're technically going to be working for the government of South Africa, you will indicate that you're applying as a foreign law clerk. Now, if you're residing outside of South Africa and you want to come and do the clerkship, there are some visa requirements that the court will assist you with. Because you're technically a volunteer, you would have to apply for a volunteer visa, but the court will give you all the necessary documents. I really wanted to make this video as well because as someone who studied law in South Africa, there are not a lot of clear career paths as a foreigner, because despite my birth in South Africa, I was still classified as an international student and as a foreigner, and so my options were not very clear. And also, just as law students, foreign or local, you always think that you have to do articles immediately after you graduate, but there are so many amazing opportunities like the Constitutional Court clerkship that will give you like an unmatched experience and really get your feet wet. So the foreign clerkship is an amazing opportunity. Unfortunately, for the only criticism I would have for a foreign clerkship is that there are not a lot of sources of funding, because international clerks, especially from the Western countries, they get sponsored to work on the African continent and to do human rights, and so it's easier for them to secure funding to work as volunteers from their governments, and a lot of African countries don't have those funds, so it's also a challenge. But a good trick in ensuring that you do have some financial support if you're unable to support yourself for the clerkship is like what I did. I had a scholarship, and so I had some funds coming through whilst I was studying and doing the clerkship. So if you're doing your PhD in a South African university and you've got sponsorship and you've got a stipend, so that you're not starving and you don't have transport and like you're not in a dire situation, that's one other way you can sustain your time working for free at the Constitutional Court. I don't know of any other sources of funding. If you guys know, please let's share this information with others. So let me go into the application documents. So CV is very standard. Just outline where you've worked, no more than 2 pages, like stipulate what it is you've done. It's very simple. You don't need to go into like descriptions. You can describe the nature of the work and the skills you've acquired in your personal statement. An important thing about personal statements, please ensure that you're you're not just talking about yourself and how amazing this opportunity is for you and how it'll elevate your career. Make sure you're talking about the bigger picture, about how you can contribute, how you feel like you can produce something different and assist and be more critical. Like, talk about what you can give to the clerkship rather than what you're going to receive from that experience, and also reflect on your bigger goals and how you want to continue advocating for human rights or constitutionalism beyond the clerkship. And then it's okay if you don't have human rights experience. There's a lot of people who have done corporate and have are already admitted attorneys, and they've worked in corporate South Africa before, and they still get the clerkship. But it's important, if you are fresh out of varsity like myself, you don't have years of experience to leverage, and so showing an interest in human rights and indicating that you actually care about the work of the court will really help you in attaining the clerkship. And another tip for people fresh out of their LLB degree who want to clerk is that you also have to have really good marks. It's a lot easier if they see that, okay, you haven't got a lot of work experience, but your academic performance is stellar, and so the court is more willing to take you on because you're teachable, and because the court knows that after gaining this as your first job experience, you are going to have other opportunities and go on to do good things. And so try during your varsity years, volunteer, try and get the best marks you can get so that your chances of getting accepted are much higher. If you've been experienced and you're working, that's it's already an advantage. And so I'm sure there's other videos, YouTube videos, that can speak to people who've got work experience before and applying to the Concord. Another thing you must submit is your sample of writing. I wrote my piece of writing from scratch. Of course, it was about citizenship. I didn't want to use a university assignment because I felt like it didn't really reflect like the topics of the essays and reports and research I had done in my undergrad were not like something I was very passionate about. And I was very mindful of the potential that in an interview I could be asked about my written piece, and I wanted to be confident that what I wrote is what I know, and you can ask me anything about it and I'll be able to answer. Whereas I'm writing about something in banking law in a assignment that I did and got a distinction for, but don't really know much about. I was very mindful of that. But if you're confident in your assignment or whatever you want to submit it. A lot of people also submit their dissertations for their masters or PhDs. So you can also speak on that and submit that. An important part of your written piece in terms of style guide. All universities and law schools have different styles of how to reference. I went to UJ, so we had the SAR guide. That's how you reference. Most people, some universities will use like Harvard or whatever other like style criteria you have. So what I did when I was writing my piece, I made sure that I looked at previous constitutional court judgments, how they did their footnotes. I tried to resemble that as best as I could. So for readability, it's easier and it's familiar. And then an important piece about your sample of writing is the title. Like, the title needs to be succinct, needs to catch the eye, because the first thing the reviewers are going to look at is the title of your written piece, and that will determine whether they'll be curious to read it or not. And it's ideal if the title and the topic of your research is on constitutionalism, human rights, and related areas of the law. That's a big advantage. Also showing that you have a keen interest in human rights, constitutional law, which can be gauged from your written statement to your work experience and to your sample of writing. There must be some form of perhaps constitutional or human rights interest in there. You have to have motivated for that. Even if you've worked in corporate, there must be some form of human rights motivation in why you want to clerk at the Constitutional Court. And so that's your application. There's another video that was filmed. It's on the Constitutional Court's YouTube channel. I was also part of that video where we went into there might be some unanswered questions here, so you can go back and look at that video. Because I'm in it, and there's another clerk who is an attorney and had much more working experience than I did, so you can compare the two. And so yes, it's a very stressful application process. Just make sure everything is there, because I don't think it's just unprofessional if you forgot to submit something and then you're emailing again and asking for an extension. You're just giving people a lot of admin. So just try your best to submit everything perfect, no errors, nothing missing. Another thing about the foreign clerkship, the applications are accepted on a rolling basis. So as you will see, the local clerkship applications open from January till March, and you can submit as a foreign law clerk in that period of time, like I did. It's better to apply sooner, and you can, I knew what was going to happen, and I could plan my life around if I was accepted or not. So the sooner the better. But if you want to show up in July and apply as a foreign clerk, you can definitely do that. Applications are routinely accepted. There's no strict cutoff date, and you can negotiate and indicate when you want to start and for how long. It's not like the local clerks, because you're getting paid, you're expected to be there for a full year, and so there's a little bit more flexibility. Now I want to jump into my experience as a foreign law clerk. Already, like I mentioned, I had finished my LLB the year before I started at the Concord, and it was my very first full-time job. And the nature of the Constitutional Court is that you're working with people who, like I mentioned, are attorneys, are advocates, have had years of research and legal experience. And so I was amongst a few of the youngest people at the Concord, and so it's already challenging. You're navigating just knowing that you need to go to work every day, managing deliverables, and also learning at the same time. And there's a lot of information that you receive. There's a lot of applications that are filed at the Constitutional Court. You must read, you must summarize, you must debate. And so it's very nerve-wracking. A lot of the time I felt like an imposter. I was like, what am I doing here? Am I capable? And I think that's just the nature of anyone starting a first job, and let alone a first job at the highest court in the country, where the caliber and the expectation is very high. But it was an amazing learning experience. I learned so much about constitutional litigation, jurisdiction, what matters does the Constitutional Court hear, what matters can't the court hear, why the judges make their decisions, how to write and how judges write their judgments, and the thinking and the admin and the efforts. You will be so surprised at how many read-throughs, how many edits, how many comments, how many different perspectives are contributing to a final judgment. And so there's so much that happens behind the scenes, and just learning about that was very enriching. It had its challenges. Of course, the biggest is just fighting imposter syndrome that I think everyone deals with, and It's a very enriching experience, and a lot of people who leave the court can attest to how much it has propelled them and how much it has afforded them other opportunities, and whether you will go on to practice human rights or not, the skills that you learn there are easily transferable. And also, just I think the biggest benefit is speaking to a judge and discussing matters, um, learning, like understanding how other people are. And I think for me the biggest thing was listening and hearing how other people like interpreted stuff and understood stuff differently to me. And yeah, and it was for a short time, and I'm glad I did it. And yeah, you guys, if you're interested in that opportunity, definitely go for it. If you studied law in South Africa and you don't have articles, or even if you do have an offer for articles and you're local, make sure you apply and try something different. And also the nature of the work is so different. Like most law firms don't litigate out of the constitutional court a lot, so it's good that you will gain all of that experience. So let me know if you have any questions, any comments. I hope that this video was useful, and I'll link, there are other YouTubers who've clerked at the court as well who are South African and might have and probably have a different experience and advice, especially if you've worked and you're wanting to clerk. Be sure to watch those as well, and also check out the Constitutional Court's website. And yeah, thank you for watching.